Begin with a little story I heard about a journalist who was in Jerusalem, and she had heard about this old rabbi who had been going for years to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, and he would pray and pray every day. And she approached him one day as she was there doing an interview. She said, "Sir, I'm from the BBC, and I'd like to ask you a few questions. How long have you been coming to this Western Wall to pray?" And he said, "I've been coming for 50 years. That's amazing," says the journalist. "And what have you been praying for over these 50 years? He says, "I've been praying for peace between the Arabs and the Jews. I've been praying for world peace and the end of hunger and poverty and just general happiness." "That's a beautiful thing," says the journalist. "And how has it gone over these past 50 years? "How has it gone?" says the rabbi. "How do I feel? I feel like I'm talking to a stinking wall," right? The wall, the Kotel in Jerusalem is a mixed bag, right? For some, it is like the conduit to heaven. It's almost like a supernal vending machine where you put in your little note in the wall, you put in your prayer, and somehow you pull the lever and you get exactly what you're asking for, what you're looking for. It's gone a little far. Now there's the Kotel cam. You can go online and see what's happening at the Kotel, at the Western Wall, but you can also send them an email and they'll roll it up and put it in the wall for you. You can even call a friend who's at the wall and they'll put the phone up to the wall, right? I'm not saying it works or it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, but maybe it works for other people. I'm an agnostic on the wall and prayers straight to heaven. But I am not an agnostic on the power of that wall. That wall and what it symbolizes is truly magnificent. It's powerful. Make no mistake about it. The Western Wall, the last bit of portion we have from the original temple, the retaining wall, symbolizes the Jewish ability of resilience, right? And you can say what you want about the Jews. You can't call us unresilient. We are a resilient people facing difficulties and challenges and struggles and persecution and devastation and horrors. We keep getting up. We keep coming back over and over again. And we do so because we learn life's lessons. We learn what to do, what not to do. We learn how to survive. That's what we've been doing for thousands of years, symbolized in that wall and the walls that surround Jerusalem. Now, I always knew this, but it kind of hit home a couple of weeks ago when I was watching a movie. An unlikely place to find Torah, but Torah is everywhere. God's teachings are everywhere, even in the movie World War Z. How many of you have seen World War Z? Hands up. For those of you who haven't seen World War Z, you're not missing much. It's just another pro-Zionist zombie movie. They're a dime a dozen, right? It is probably the most pro-Zionist movie I've seen in ages, and certainly the most pro-Zionist zombie movie in a long time. That's what it's about. It's about the end of the world is coming, right? Lots of these movies. How is it coming? Through a virus. A virus is spreading throughout the world, and everybody's being hit by it. Everybody's being affected except for one country in this movie, and of course, that country is Israel. How did Israel survive, or at least for a period of time, until the peaceniks started singing in the middle of the movie? What were they singing? Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom, which we sing in a few minutes here, right? Up until that moment, it was all going fine and dandy, and then the peaceniks brought the whole thing down. But the bottom line is, what happened in Israel that was different than the rest of the world? That's what Brad Pitt's character wants to find out in the movie. So he goes to Israel to meet with one of the leaders of Israel to see how did they know to build a wall. Because everybody knew of the rumors of this virus spreading, and everybody heard the murmuring and the chatter, but it was only Israel that took action and did something about it and built this protective wall. And this is where it's no longer fiction, but it's actually fact, where we leave World War Z behind and we enter into Israeli history. Because this leader in the movie is speaking on behalf of leaders in the past of Israel. He says that they knew to build the wall because they learned the hard way. What was the hard way? Almost 40 years ago today, right? On Yom Kippur was the Yom Kippur War, 1973, where Israel was almost wiped off the face of the map. Why? Because the neighbors around them, the enemy neighbors, the Arabs, surrounded them and were encroaching upon the borders and amassing their troops on the borders of the Israeli territory, and they were caught off guard. Israel was totally caught off guard. And this was the question that the Israelis asked themselves then, and we've been asking ever since. How did this happen? A superior military power in Israel, how did they get caught off guard? And one of the reasons in my studies was because of what's called military state of mind. Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan and all of their advisors had a military state of mind. What is that? When the leaders no longer listen to their subordinates, when the challenges that are brought forward to the leadership are squashed, when the leaders have made up their mind about the facts on the ground and they stop seeing the reality as it was happening. And this is what happened in Israel. They stopped seeing the fact that the Arabs were about to attack, and they did attack, and Israel came so close to being eradicated, wiped off the face of the map. In psychology terms, this is called inattentional blindness. Michael Shermer puts it in his book, In the Believing Brain. The human brain is a belief engine. We seek patterns. We create patterns so that we can live this life. We create patterns, and then we start filling in the ending because we know the patterns. And sometimes the patterns are true, but sometimes, like with the Yom Kippur War, the patterns are not. And yet we continue to see what we want to see, and we continue to believe what we want to believe, and we surround ourselves with people who enable us, who enable us to keep on with those false, faulty beliefs. This is what happened in Israel. And after the Yom Kippur War, they truly said, never again. Never again would they be caught off guard as they were in 1973. And they didn't just leave it up to chance. What did they do? And this is what Brad Pitt character learns in the movie, and it's what happened after the Yom Kippur War. They created what's called the 10th man principle. Have you heard about the 10th man principle? The Israelis created the 10th man principle, and it goes like this. In any given military situation, if you have 10 men or women in the Israeli army, if you have 10 people who all agree, 10 leaders who all agree, it's the job of the 10th man, it's the job of one person to disagree. Whenever there's unanimity within the Israeli army, one person has to take upon themselves, regardless of their beliefs, the 10th man principle. And they have to argue different scenarios and different possibilities and the what ifs, and have you thought about that? Their job is to be, as we say in Hebrew, a nudnik, a pain in the you-know-what. Their job is to poke holes in the theories, to challenge assumptions, to question the beliefs. Because without that, you could end up once again with this military mind, with this inattention blindness. You could end up where we were, God forbid, in 1973, almost wiped off the face of the earth. And so the 10th man principle was put into action, and it has existed ever since. But the truth is, this goes back to the Torah portion, this week's Torah portion. In many ways, Noah was the 10th man. I've always read Noah more of a lens of what Gabby did, not as the greatest leader. He was passed over as the job for the first Jew, partially because he didn't seem to reach out to the people around him. However, the Midrash, the rabbis tell stories, Jewish stories, what happened behind the scenes. And they say that Noah did try. They say Noah not only built the ark, but he grew the trees that would eventually become the ark, which is to say, he was doing this for 50, 60, 100 years. He was getting ready for this flood, and he was out there preaching to the masses, and they were the 9th man, and the 8th man, and the 7th man. They would not listen. They were unanimous in their opinion that no flood was coming. It's bright out. The skies are sunny. There's no rain. And Noah kept saying, but it's going to rain, and the floods are coming. Noah, in many ways, was the 10th man. And though they didn't listen to him, it's because of the 10th man that ultimately saved humanity, saved the day. Whenever there's unanimity, whenever there's complete agreement in Judaism, you can be sure of one thing. It's not Jewish. Jews don't agree on anything, first and foremost, but our tradition says that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Whenever you see unanimity, complete agreement, our rabbis say, run the other way. In the Talmud, it says that the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of their time, which was made up of 23 justices, if they found a defendant guilty of capital and deemed worthy of capital punishment, if all 23 found this guy guilty, do you know what they had to do to him? Let him go. If all 23, if there wasn't one person who dissented, if there wasn't one person who voiced an alternative opinion, if there wasn't one person who stood up and presented some reasonable doubt, the rabbi said something is awry, something is off. There has to be a 10th man, a 10th woman to stand up and defend this person before we put them to death. And so ultimately this person was set free. In fact, to be a part of the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, you had to pass a test. What was the test? They gave you the challenge of taking a reptile, right? A reptile, any reptile, which is not kosher in Judaism. You can't eat reptiles. I don't know why you'd want to eat reptiles, but you can't eat them, okay? And so the rabbis say, if you want a seat on this Sanhedrin, on this Supreme Court, you have to convince us that this reptile is kosher. You have to give us reasons and proofs from the Torah and the Talmud. It's like saying that gravity pulls us up or that the sun revolves around the earth. You've got to make the case. It's an impossible case, but your job, if you want to be on this Supreme Court, on the Sanhedrin, is to make the impossible possible or to die trying. Your job is to be the 10th man and make the case when everybody else is unanimous, is in agreement. And so this is what defines greatness in Judaism throughout history and the great men and women who have come, not just through Judaism. We've had great 10th men and women in Judaism, Abraham and Sarah, who we're going to read about next week, and others. But we've also had them in our secular society, men and women who were 10th men. Galileo was a 10th man, right? The Wright brothers were 10th men. Christopher Columbus, Martin Luther King Jr. We've had so many great 10th men and 10th women who have come when the world was unanimous and said, but have you thought about this? And what if that? Now more than ever before, we need a 10th man. We need a 10th woman. We need 10th man thinking in every area of life. In regards to military issues and politics and the peace process, we don't just need people to give us 50 reasons why we should build a wall. We need new people, new players to give us 50 reasons why we should take down walls. We need people to come along and show us possibilities that we never imagined possible, to make the impossible possible. And lest I leave this at the macro level for all of us to say, where is the Martin Luther King Jr.'s or the Gandhis of our generation? It's important to bring this home because the rabbis say in the Mishnah, Uv'makom she'ein anashim tishtedel liot ish. In a place where there is no real man, stand up and be a real man. In a place where there is no real woman, stand up and be a real woman. In a place where there is no 10th man, stand up and be that 10th man. This is a call to action for all of us. Right? Whether you're talking about the boardroom or your bedroom, the family room or your any room, whether you're talking about your marriage or your family or your synagogue or your church or any organization you care about, whether you're talking about the community, this Jewish community, it's time for a 10th man, a 10th woman, a 10th person way of thinking to arise, to make the impossible possible, to challenge our assumptions, to question our beliefs, to come up with a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, to speak up, to speak out, to start growing our trees so we can chop them down and build them into an ark and we can sail ultimately through the storms of life so we can sail the 7 seas.